jurisdictions outside of the GTA, smaller areas. FOLA has heard that comment before, and we have acted on that in terms of the motion that was brought before the Law Society to look at ways of developing attractions for younger lawyers to practice in more remote and rural areas and underserviced areas. And so in keeping with that theme, this panel is here with us this morning to discuss new models for lawyers to enter into the profession. So we have, not in the order on my list, Jason Pichelli from the Law Society, Leanne Shafir from the Lincoln Alexander School of Law at the Metropolitan University, and Hope Buset from the Bora Laskin Faculty of Law at Lakehead, and last but not least, Fariyia Walji, the Law Practice Program at the Toronto Metropolitan University. So welcome to our panel. I hope that we will have a great discussion. Time permitting, we will have some question and answers after.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're standing
Okay.
Hello, I'm Jason Pichelli. I work for the Law Society of Ontario in the Policy Division. I support professional development and competence, which is why I'm here today to talk to you about licensing and paths to becoming a lawyer. So I thought I'd start off first by briefly going over the lawyer licensing process. How does somebody become a lawyer in Ontario? So first, you need a common law degree from a Canadian university, or to have gone through the NCA process. I can talk about that later if there are questions about what that is. Of course, you have to apply. Next, pass the licensing exams. So those licensing exams sit 3 times per year: summer, winter, fall, June, November, February. You have to register about a month in advance. And the exams are set 2 weeks apart. So barrister first, then solicitor, and you take about 8 weeks to get results. Be deemed of good character. So the Law Society Act requires all applicants to be of good character. That is something that's assessed through the licensing process, through answering questions like if you've had judgments against you, for example, been fired for cause, etc. Then next, we have gain experiential training. That's why we're here. That's an alternative way to say pathways to the profession. That can be articling, the LPP or PPD, or it can be an integrated practice curriculum program as well. Finally, licensure. So in the past, in-person call to the bar ceremonies were held in June in Toronto, Ottawa, and London. In 2020, the Law Society actually brought forward an administrative process that still exists to this day. So if you don't want to go in person to be called to the bar, you can be called administratively. Those are scheduled for November, January, February, April, and July. The call to the bar ceremony actually in person. The ceremonial one just happened in October. The 2024 dates are TBD. So experiential training pathways. In 2011, the Law Society had an articling task force that was brought together to look at the number of unplaced candidates that the Law Society was seeing in the articling process and the licensing process. This task force took about a year to review the issue, and there were a lot of pressures on the system at the time. Some of them continue to this day. For example, increased enrollment in law schools. So in 1997, there were about 1,100 law students in Ontario. That number had grown to 1,400 by 2011 when the task force sat. Another pressure was the increase in internationally trained applicants. In 1999, the Law Society had 89 internationally educated individuals apply for licensure. That number grew to over 700 by 2011. So as a result, the task force recommended the implementation of a pilot project called the Law Practice Program to be operated side by side with articling as an alternative pathway for individuals who perhaps couldn't find an articling placement or perhaps even didn't want one. As part of this, it was also integral to the committee in their recommendation that skills component be added as a component of the experiential training placement. So they wanted to see more opportunities for skill learning to be combined with the practice component afterwards so that those competencies could be reinforced. So this led to the development of the LPP programs through an RFP process. Both of them began in 2014 with TMU and for the English language program and the University of Ottawa for the French language program. But as part of this process, it's also important to remember the Law Society didn't just want to create new programs, it also asked law schools if they could innovate and look at ways to integrate that skills component that I just mentioned into a traditional law school program. So the first respondent to that particular request was Lakehead through the Bora Laskin program, which is called an integrated practice curriculum. In 2019, TMU also brought forward a program with an IPC. Okay, so the articling program itself. Another measure that the Law Society brought forward in 2020, in response to the pandemic, was shortening the minimum articling length term to 8 months. That measure remains in place today. The traditional term is 10 months. You can still have a 10-month articling placement, and that is actually the preferred length that we still see today. However, at the time, there were concerns about in-person placements and being able to fill a full 10-month schedule, so it was reduced to 8 months. The Law Society sees about 1,800 articling placements on an annual basis. 75% of these are in private practice, about 15% in sole and small firms, that's defined by the Law Society as 1 to 5 lawyers, 40% in medium-sized firms, 6 to 200 lawyers in the firm, and about 20% in large firms, that's 200 plus. In 2017, the Law Society again had another report on articling. This process was called the Dialogue on Articling, responding to very similar pressures that we saw in 2011. I mentioned earlier we had 700 internationally trained candidates and about 1,800 in the 2012 period. By 2021, we saw about 1,700 domestic students and 1,150 internationally trained applicants. So a 60-40 split between domestic and international. So again, an increasing number of candidates trying to apply through the licensing process and putting pressure on the process. So as a result of that report, the Law Society brought forward what are called enhancements. So some changes to the articling program to try to address some of these challenges. The first one of those was mandatory minimum compensation. The Law Society passed this in April of last year at $620 per week. There is an exemption process for principals who are unable to pay. I can talk about that a bit later. Another component of that was introducing a risk-based approach to monitoring placements. So during the consultation for that report, the Law Society heard about a lot of issues related to discrimination, harassment, placements that are terminated prematurely. So to help combat this and gain better data about exactly why placements are breaking down, the Law Society is going to better monitor and actually reach out to candidates and principals when a placement breaks down to sort out why that happened and help bridge those gaps where possible. There's also an orientation program for principals and supervisors that came out of that. That's to introduce the training and provide practical guidance for addressing very common concerns that the Law Society hears that we felt could be addressed through a training program. The thing that I find most useful actually from it are the resources at the end of each module. So helpful links and guides to resources that are in place to help principals or candidates find help and support that actually exists. But without this kind of program, it's hard to navigate that system. The Law Society also has the opportunity for individuals to split an article. So that's called a joint article. That's where two principals can share one candidate. That's been in place for a long time, but I've heard before that some souls and smalls sometimes struggle to meet the minimum compensation requirement or to have enough work maybe for a single candidate. So perhaps you're two souls who share office space, you could also split a candidate as well. There's also part-time articles. So perhaps you have a candidate who doesn't have the capacity to fill it full-time, or your principal who doesn't have the ability to necessarily give as much work as a full-time candidate would require. You could lengthen that placement by giving the candidate a part-time article position. I'll just briefly go through this. I just put this slide in place to show how much things have changed since 2012. There are a lot of check-ins related to the articling process now. At the beginning of the process, you're going to file articles of clerkship talking about the experiential training competencies that will be achieved through the placement. Has to be signed both by the candidate and by the principal. The Law Society monitors placements, of course, throughout. And at the end, you're filing a document to say you've attained these competencies, the placement was high quality, etc. So the law practice program, I mentioned earlier, TMU operates the English program and has done so since 2014. The University of Ottawa offers the French language program and has done so since 2014 as well. In the past 10 years, we've seen about 2,500, I believe, grads on the English side and about 160 on the French side. Right now, I think the enrollment is about 260 candidates at TMU and about 10 at University of Ottawa. So the law practice program split into two parts. Training course that's about 4 months, where the candidates are given practical experience in a variety of areas of law, especially practice management. This is done to help them develop skills like project management, community involvement, business development, and technological proficiency. The candidates are evaluated by their competencies throughout this process. Next, the candidates will have a work placement where they're directly able to apply the skills and learnings from their training component into a work placement. These timelines are on average. They can be amended, and I'm sure Leanne will talk to you about that in a minute. So the IPC, the integrated practice curriculum, I mentioned it earlier. It's a law school degree program that incorporates the experiential training competencies and entry-level practice competencies into the traditional law school coursework. So IPC programs give students who are interested in becoming practicing lawyers an opportunity to learn and practice their entry-level competencies in the law school environment. I'll cut my presentation short there. For people who are interested, these are important web pages on the Law Society's website to give you some better information about the process, the fees, the costs. Happy to answer questions, of course, if there are about these particular processes. And these are some important, that's the email address, or if you have a question about maybe becoming a principal or about the Law Society's licensing process more generally, or phone numbers you can call if you have any questions about being a principal or anything related to the licensing process. Okay.
I think we're on this one here.
Hello. Are you enjoying so far? Awesome. So we're going a little bit out of order in terms of how the program's established. The LPP came before the IPC
Maybe, do you want to go with Bora?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Hope Buset, and I've been working at the Bora Laskin Faculty of Law since 2017. And I'm excited to be talking to you about the IPC, the Integrated Practice Curriculum. It is a really unique way of doing law school. Effectively, what we're doing is bringing a lot of the skill developments and the competencies that students learn during their articling, we're bringing them in-house into the law school. And we're going to break that down a little bit and explain that to you as to how we're doing that. But it is an innovative way of doing law school, and we opened our doors in 2013. And it was a response to the articling crisis in Ontario. There weren't enough articling positions for law students. So what happened was people that were way smarter than me and from a lot of more years than I had got together in Thunder Bay. It involved our Thunder Bay Law Association. They collaborated with Fort William First Nation and our Indigenous stakeholders, as well as Lakehead University, and the Federation of Law Societies, the Federation of Law Associations, and the LSO to come together to create this innovative program called the IPC for short. And as a result, it became a law school in Thunder Bay, so that's where we're located, in 2013. So this September, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. We've graduated several students. We're really excited about what they're doing. Some of them might be part of your law associations. They're all over the place, all over Ontario, practicing, which is really exciting. And because we've done, I think, such a good job with that innovative education, we passed the ball over to TMU, who picked it up and sort of took that model and continued to grow with it.
Thank you for doing that. So I'm Leanne Shafir. I direct the Career Development and Professional Placement Office at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law. We've had 3 name changes since I started. The school was established in 2019. Our first class of students came in 2020. It was in the pandemic. I was working at Osgood at the time, so I literally took my stuff from one side of my desk, shifted over, worked with TMU, had a little stuff in between. And we just graduated our first class of students, about 159. 50 of them went through the first call to the bar in October. The other 2/3 will graduate over the next little bit. Onwards. Sure. So the Lincoln Alexander School of Law was formed or grounded in essentially 4 pillars, and those 4 pillars permeate all of the curriculum, all of the programming, and things that are done at the law school. So the first one is equity, diversity, and inclusion. We will show you some demographics in a little bit, but it's an extremely diverse group of students and staff and faculty and administration that are at the law school. The idea was to change the face of the profession in a number of different ways. One of them is looking at demographics. Access to justice, another pillar. It really was thinking about bringing in lawyers that are going to service community and the population in a way that promotes, furthers, and celebrates access to justice. Innovation and entrepreneurship. So looking at the kinds of things the students are learning. They're learning coding, they're learning the business of lawyering, they're learning how to innovate and do things a little bit differently. And one of the reasons is that they will come right from their IPC curriculum and go right into practice in sooner, quicker, in various communities. And then academic excellence, and you can see that woven into the many courses, faculty, research that's at the law school. We'll talk more about it in a little bit.
So for the Bora Laskin Faculty of Law, we're built on 3 mandate areas. So our first mandate area is Indigenous and Aboriginal law. So as part of that mandate, all of our law students must take mandatory courses in these areas. They take 2 mandatory courses in first year, and one of them is actually a really interesting course. It's our Indigenous Perspective Hours, where our students are they're given some directions and some teachings, but then they're sort of sent out into the Thunder Bay and the Fort William First Nation community to log hours that involve participating in events and ceremony and some tradition and cultural events. So this is really great for our students that may not have otherwise had exposure to our Indigenous communities up in Thunder Bay. So that's a great first year course that they have to take. There's another mandatory course in second year that our students have to take, as well as there are themes of Indigenous and Aboriginal law woven throughout all of our courses, all of our other mandatory courses like contracts, torts, criminal law, etc. So that is one of our biggest focuses at our law school. Our students are encouraged to meet with our elders. They're encouraged to participate in various events at our law school. We also just opened an Indigenous Law and Justice Institute. And we also incorporate land-based learning into their first year orientation programming. So this past year, we actually brought them out to our Quetico Center just outside of Thunder Bay, and they got to build a sweat lodge and then participate in sweats, which was really just a very wonderful experience. Our second our mandate area, I should say, is natural resource and environmental law. So many of our electives are focused on this, and as we probably all can imagine, there's a lot of overlap between Aboriginal Indigenous law and natural resource and environmental law, so they're getting exposed to that area of law by coming to our law school. And then finally, our soul and small town practice with the integrated practice curriculum. That kind of is just a way to reiterate the importance of the IPC program. So giving the students the skills that they need to practice law. We are incorporating skill-based activities and assessments and assignments throughout their entire 3 years at the law school. So from year one, day one, they're learning the theory of the law, but then they're also learning a practical skill set so they could put that into practice when they graduate. So they do that in first year. Second year, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Third year, they have these skill development exercises combined with their practice placement that they have to take. And the hope and the goal of them graduating from our program is that then they can go out and basically hang a shingle if they wanted to. They have to pass their bar admission exams, of course, but once they do that, they could go right into practice without having to article. So those are our three focuses, and with the goal that our students stay in some more remote areas in and around Thunder Bay, but also in Southern Ontario as well, and many of our graduates are doing that, so it's great to see.
Until we bring them down to Toronto.
Yeah, that happens too.
So, student demographics. These are just some of the demographics we thought you would find interesting. So 14.6% of our students identify as LGBTQ2S+. 84.5% of them are first-generation law students, so first in their family to go to university, first in their family to go to law school. With a STEM background, 19.68, very high. We do a lot of recruiting in the science fields, engineering, going into schools and universities and really talking to the students in the STEM courses. 17, is that right? It's my own, almost 12% identify with a disability. That's high across the board, but at the law school we work specifically with them. I'll talk about it in the placement area. Students who identify with cis woman is 58%. If I'm saying the numbers wrong, it's because I'm converting from my glasses to not. 25% cis male, 16.6% other, which is high.
You can see the statistics about the Bora Laskin Faculty of Law up on the screen. I won't go through them. I just wanted to note one of the biggest differences between the TMU program and the Bora Laskin program is our student size. We're a very small school, so our incoming class caps out at 65 students. So we're only accepting 65 students in any given year. So that makes it very, very small. So just keep that in mind when you're reviewing our demographics.
Our curriculum, I know you're all excited to hear about it. So we had the benefit of talking with Hope and her colleagues to learn more about what she's done and what they've done in the program, also the LPP colleagues. So we actually are very, very grateful and appreciative of all of the work and background and experience they've had. For our program, all of the competencies that you would need as you go through articles of clerkship are woven into every single course in every single year. So there's a beautiful colored mapping document that looks at all of the core required courses and then all of the optional courses and maps out the competencies that you'd need into each course. So for first year, for example, in a regular law school, although I don't know if law schools are all regular now, a contracts class may be primarily theoretical. You'd look at contract, you look at all of the basic theory around contracts. In ours, you have a co-teaching model. So you have a faculty member that's teaching contracts, teaching the theory, looking at your regular items, and then there's a practitioner who meets with the students and actually works with them on a practical experiential assignment. So you learn the theory in class, there's a tutorial, you talk about a Raptors baseball player and then the NBA, and you negotiate a contract, you draft the contract, you renegotiate, and then you go and draft the terms. So the students are actually looking at that, again, in every single course, so towards crim, constitutional, everything they do. In their second year, a lot of it looks a lot like the LPP, which you're going to hear about because one of the administrators who helped create it had priorly worked at the LPP. They've got the regular courses. Again, the competencies are all woven in. First term, they do a business firm, and second term, they do a civil firm, so in addition to their other courses. And they're working with the faculty member and then practitioners. They're broken down into small groups, and they do assignments that they would otherwise perhaps get at law firms or wherever, whatever they were doing in their articling year. The third term is their professional placement. So they spend 15 weeks working with a legal employer. It could be in firm, in-house, government. We have a program with the Ontario Court of Justice. We have about 20 students each year that are working under the direction of judges, and they're learning primarily family or criminal law research. It's been an amazing opportunity. And that placement is monitored by a faculty member, and there's a course that's taught alongside it. So the students start with a 1-week intensive where they learn essentially whatever we think they need to know before they go into practice. So they're learning research, they're learning communication skills, they're learning about ethical issues. We've had some great volunteers from staff from the Law Society who've come in and talked about professional issues and how to manage that. They go into their placements, they come back every 3 weeks, and they spend time talking about different buckets of competencies that they have to acquire. And we teach them how to get the competencies that they might otherwise not be getting if they weren't being able to speak up and communicate. So we help them maximize their experience. And we work with them if there's any issues. So the idea is that it's a very supported, managed and structured placement. So they actually get the employment component and they get the assistance and support from the law school. So that's the 3 years in a nutshell.
And our 3-year program is definitely similar to TMU. So in the sense that, like I said, all the skill development exercises are built into the curriculum, so much like what Leanne said about the contracts, that's a great example. Similarly, for our criminal law class, our students are doing a mock bail, a mock sentencing. For their Indigenous law course, they're doing a sharing circle. So in first year, they're getting all the core competencies woven throughout their mandatory courses. We don't have a co-teaching system. Our students are taught by one faculty member or one instructor, and the instructors are usually lawyers from the Thunder Bay community that come in and teach. All of our faculty members have background in teaching or in practicing law, so they're not too far from the practice of law. So that works really well for our students. In their second year, we're just building on those competencies from first year, getting a little bit more into the skill development side of things. So they're doing a full civil procedure course. It's a full year course, and we've split them up into 2 different law firms, and they file documents against each other. And then at the end of the course, they're doing a full day mock trial where they have to do their cross-examinations, directs, introduce evidence and everything. So that's one of our capstone courses. For our Aboriginal law class, this IPC assignment is absolutely wonderful. We have our students do a multi-party negotiation, so there's like 6 different people around the table and 6 different positions around the table, and we have our 2L students negotiate a very complicated Aboriginal law matter and come up with some terms of settlement, and then they have to do a reporting letter to their client and whatnot. So we could go on and give examples of how we're doing this, but it is real hands-on experience that they're getting in their first year, second year, and into the third year with all of their courses. Similarly to what Leanne said, their program's called the Professional Placement. Our program's called practice placement. We have our students going all over Ontario for their practice placement. They do it in the fall semester or the winter semester of their third year. When they're not doing their placement, they're in the classroom doing more skill development exercises. Again, it's a really monitored program. We do some training with the students before they go into practice placement so they know what to expect. We do regular check-ins with our students all the way through. I actually personally phone call all of our students and meet with them on Zoom or a phone call to check in to find out how it's going. I can do that. My numbers are a little bit lower than Leanne's. So it's a real hands-on where I'm giving them as much support as they need as they go through practice placement. And then we do a really important debriefing session at the end of placement where we reflect on the experience and do a lot of reflective learning at the end of it. So it's a very busy 3 years. Our students often complain about how much they have to do in those 3 years because they're taking quite a few, they're taking more classes than most law schools because we have to make up for that time when they're in placement as well. So it is a busy 3 years, but at the end of it, they should be good to go and practice law.
It's making me rethink my Google form to check in. Anyway, just kidding. Professional or practice placement. So we've talked about the placement. It's 15 weeks. It's under the supervision of a lawyer who's licensed in Ontario. They have to have practiced for 3 years, at least 3 years. They can only supervise up to 2 licensing candidates. So that could be an IPC, an articling, or an LPP candidate. We would be very, very happy to have any of the law firms outside of Toronto take a student. It's a very simple application process. You fill in a link, we post it, we collect the students' applications. The firms, they're the employers or the in-house, interviews the students and makes an offer. Our placements are 86-ish% paid, the other unpaid. Most of the unpaid right now for our program are clinical placements in legal aid clinics or not-for-profit organizations. We are working very hard to try to get those funded through donors, through other forms of funding, so that it is more equity-based. Accommodations, I've worked, because we had the opportunity to work with this first group of students, we've worked directly with Central Toronto Metropolitan University Accommodations Office to try to create policies and programming if there is a specific student that needs an accommodation and a placement. So it's much more catered than if they're off on their own, possibly in an articling program. We expect a lot of our students. They do check-ins. They do have to have a reflective component, and they have to follow through on all of the required competencies that we require. Supervising lawyers as well. We check in on them. There's an hour video where we talk about what it is and what's needed. I do get a lot of phone calls directly from employers if there's issues or just to check in to find out more because it's a new program. We seem to be getting a lot of phone calls, and we're always happy to talk to people. And value of placements for students. They come in with competencies already layered up. So a lot of the profession thinks that this is the first time that they're actually getting the competencies and that the 15 weeks replaces the articling component. And it's not the case. They actually build all of these competencies and skills from day one. So by the time they're doing their professional placement, they really are ready to hit the ground running, and they have skills that they're working on and finessing and growing and learning. So it's been invaluable. Feedback from the employers, for the most part, has been that the students are phenomenal. Again, our first class just graduated. Some of them have been brought back into the firms as associates. Some of them have moved along. But it has proven to be an extremely valuable component for both sides.
So for our practice placement, our requirements are slightly different than Leanne's at TMU. Our supervising lawyers have to have been called at least 5 years ago. So we went with the 5-year mark, although we can deviate from that in certain circumstances, but really 5 years is what we're aiming for. We don't want our supervising lawyers to have been disciplined by the Law Society at any point. We do want them to be learning very, very good habits at the firm that they're in. Currently, our placements are unpaid, which means that our students cannot receive a salary or a wage for doing placement. the little star beside that is that we're in the process of changing that. We're trying to do it in a way that makes sense for all the stakeholders that are involved, the employers, our not-for-profit clinics, our sole practitioners up in the north, as well as there's some OSAP concerns and things that affect students. So we're well in the trenches, and Jason could back me up on this, in trying to make a system where our students can be paid and where it'll be equitable across the way. So stay tuned on that. Our students are coming from Northwestern Ontario as well as Southern Ontario. We have quite a few that are coming from the north, which is really exciting, but they are coming from all over the place, and that means that many of them want to return to their hometowns, and that's where they want to do their placement. So as Leanne said, we're inviting all people in this room, all the lawyers as part of your association, to sign up to be a supervising lawyer for our practice placement. And I have a fancy little brochure I'm going to advertise. It's up at the registration table. Feel free to grab one. It has a whole bunch of the information about our placement. It's very easy to apply for a placement student. We usually secure them when the students are in their second year. We have them all sorted out, so then you know who's coming to your firm when they're in their third year. So I strongly encourage you to check out that pamphlet. Feel free to sign up. We're always looking for great locations for our students to complete their placement at. In terms of accommodations, it is a class. Practice placement is a course at the university. Therefore, our students are entitled to all the accommodations that come through Lakehead University because they are taking a class. I work one-on-one with the students and the supervising lawyer if a student needs accommodation while they're in placement. So just an example of where an accommodation could come up. I had a student that had a really difficult time showing up at 8:30 in the morning. From 8:30 to 10:30, they had a lot of challenges. They had documentation to medical documentation to support that. So what we did actually is we just shifted the placement. It started at 10:30 and went a little bit later in the day. So that's an example of an accommodation and how students could be accommodated in placement. So we work one-on-one with the supervising lawyers to make sure that those accommodations are individualized. Same as what Leanne said, the expectations of the practice placement students, they're pretty high. We train them so they know what to expect when they're going in placement. They know they're representing themselves, the law school, your firm. So it's all that reputational stuff. They're there to work hard. They are so excited. By the time they're in their third year, they are so done with school. They just want to go and be a lawyer and practice law. And this is a great opportunity to get that ball rolling. The expectations of the supervising lawyer: provide good mentorship. Take them along on all the things you do. Treat them not like a glorified legal assistant, but as a future lawyer. Get them involved. They are ready to go. Anecdotally, when I do check in with the supervising lawyers, and we have midterm assessments and final assessments on the students, the supervising lawyers are telling us that they're as good, if not better, than articling students. They're really happy with the level of work that is coming through, and I think it's because of integrating all that skill development through the first, second, half of the third year, and then giving them real files to work on under the supervision of practicing lawyers. So it's a really great program. It's a program I think we're definitely really proud of, and our students are returning to those firms to get full-time employment as well, so that's great to see. Some of them are staying in Northwestern Ontario, some of them are coming from the south, falling in love with Thunder Bay, staying there, but also the converse is true. They come up for their education, they want to come back home, they want to go back down to Southern Ontario and work for all of you fine people. So yeah, it's a great program, so you should consider signing up for it. That's my pitch.
We're almost done. Pathway challenges. I feel a little bit embarrassed saying that we ever have any challenges. Some of you might have heard about things going on, but specifically with the IPC pathway. In downtown Toronto, the first group of students going through this curriculum in the placement program was last year. And because they did the regulated recruit, I know there's regulations outside of Toronto, but in the larger firms, there are some very structured ways that the firms work with their summer students, their articling students, and they didn't until now, except for the students that had come down from Lakehead, have students that could essentially be called to the bar. So navigating some of those dynamics and working with employers, government, small, medium, large firms to figure out how to make this group of students fit has been an interesting challenge. The Law Society has been a really fabulous support on that, established a working group that has Lakehead, TMU, and then stakeholders from all various areas of employment So we're working through some of the challenges. Our students are helping us as well. Spring summer term, we created at Toronto Metropolitan University something called the spring summer term that could count as a placement. It had to go through various levels of academic approval up to Senate. So now students, as a result of some of the needs of employers and some of the internal needs as well, a term was created so that students could do their placement in the summer. So our first group of students actually just did that this past summer. They could then do their final courses in the fall right now, and they could be eligible to graduate in December of this year. Some are taking a gap term and then doing the rest of their courses in the winter. So challenges are yet to come, but just figuring out what that looks like and when they write their licensing exams and how that fits in with the rest of the curriculum and whether or not that component, so mapping the summer into a placement instead of employment, is still being looked at. So that's sort of the pathway challenges in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think just on the second point, the spring summer term, so our students only do their practice placement in either the fall semester of their third year or the winter semester. On occasion, we have some placements that take place over the summer, but that's usually when it's connected to an accommodation for a student. But that's how we run our program. It's just fall and winter. And in terms of the regulated recruitment, I echo the comments that Leanne said. I think it's a matter of really just getting the word out to employers and to the law associations about what this program is about and what they could expect from the students. And I think that will help us overcome some of the pathway challenges. Thank you.
Now we hand it over.
Hi, good morning. It's wonderful to be here. This is my first FOLA conference, so if we haven't had a chance to meet, please do come and introduce yourself because I don't know anyone and I'd like to make some friends. You've received a lot of information in the last 40 minutes, and I'm cognizant of the time. Before I start, I wanted to provide a little bit of context. You're here representing your local law associations, and you're working and living in communities that you may feel are underserved. There's a need for legal services. There's so much value that can be provided in a variety of communities. And maybe there's a talent pipeline that's missing. Or maybe there needs to be a greater diversity of lawyers in your community. And all of the programs that are being discussed here are really thinking about addressing that in the same way that they're looking to address the gap between finishing or being in law school and actually serving those communities. So I'm hoping that as I talk about the law practice program, you keep all of that in the back of your mind, that there's a mutually beneficial relationship that can come from connecting with the students and being a stakeholder in these programs. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about the law practice program. So the law practice program is equivalent to articling. That's the important thing to sort of note. Everyone in the law practice program has a law degree. So we're answering the question, how do we take a law student and make them a lawyer? And that's not an easy question to answer, especially when we know that there is such a diversity in both the education but also the lived experiences that law students have and that they bring into their communities. So to try to answer that question, the law practice program developed a two-part model: training and work experience. What exactly is training when we say training? Well, what we tried to do was essentially create a simulated law firm. We have roughly 250 participants in our program, and we break them up into firms. And practitioners from across the province act as the firm supervising lawyer. We call them mentors. We give the candidates case files. So we have created simulated case files. We hire actors to pose as clients. They call the candidates. Frantic, urgent voicemail left. I have an emergency. It's not always an emergency. We provide a lived experience, a simulated lived experience on a variety of different files. And the goal is that this training is to be like work. You're working with your colleagues, you're completing legal drafting and other deliverables that are equivalent to working as an articling student. On the screen, you'll see an example of the types of case files: family law, criminal law, business law, civil litigation, admin, real estate, and wills. And what we really focused on is having the candidates develop the core competencies that are needed to meet what the LSO is looking for, what our profession needs to go from law student to lawyer. The way it sort of works is candidates show up at their virtual firm, they log in on Zoom, and they'll get an email that says from their senior partner, a client just walked into my office, I did an intake, and they're really interested in starting a new business with their partner so-and-so. Could you please meet with the client, figure out whether it would be better to do a sole proprietorship or perhaps a different type of business structure, and write a memo. Then, can you draft up the requisite materials? So all of the case files, which run synchronously, are really focused on teaching candidates how to start right from the beginning. Somebody walks into your office, what do you do? To the very end, how do you run a trial? How do you do a guilty plea? How do you do a family court motion? What type of paperwork do you need to file? It's really designed to be a practical experience. Over the course of 4 months, they do about 100 deliverables. I practiced as a Crown for 5 years before I started at the law practice program. Those candidates are doing things that I never did. After 5 years of practice, they were gaining skills and working on things that I have yet to do, which I think is phenomenal. That's what we're looking for, is when someone is called to the bar and they can work on anything from, as Chris Bentley, our managing director says, murder to merger. You better have the skills to be able to do all those things. So here's a sort of a snapshot. You know, on the real estate file, they're going to work on a title search, a statement of funds. They're going to draft a purchase agreement or requisition letter. On the wills file, they're going to confirm representation and capacity. They're going to draft a power of attorney for property and draft a will. On the business law side, they'll draft a letter of intent, a share purchase agreement. They'll do a series of litigation exercises. Like I mentioned, a guilty plea. They'll do their cross-examinations. They'll run a full trial. We run what we like to jokingly say, the largest Zoom trial in the world, because we've got 60 Zoom courtrooms all running. And lawyers from across the province participate as advisors and assessors and provide our candidates with feedback so that they're getting practical mentorship on how to be fantastic lawyers when they complete the program. So overall, what we're assessing them on, it's not about teaching them substantive law. What we're looking at is the core competencies that the LSO outlines. We're looking for them to be able to effectively manage their files. They go through a file audit. I haven't been through one of those. They go through an assessment of their negotiation, advocacies, ethics, and responsibilities, and we assess them across all of those core competencies. Then, after that fantastic 4 months of experience, they move into the work experience. And the work experience is really designed, as I think TMU has and Lakehead has done as well, is to get the students outside of the academic or simulated environment and into the practicing bar. Ours run for a period of 16 weeks. Our candidates are focused on hitting the ground running. They come in with fantastic practical skills. We have a variety of employers. We have government employers, private sector employers, a series of in-house employers, banks, and the bulk of our employers are actually sole and small practitioners. And this year, 90% of our employers came back. So that's a high return rate because employers feel that our candidates have strong skills and they're a great talent pipeline to build up their organization. They can participate in all aspects of practice, like an articling student, and they're paid at the same rate as articling students. I want to talk to you about the candidates for a moment, because that's really what it's all about. It's the people in the program, many of whom have worked incredibly hard to reach this stage in the licensing process. So let me give you a little snapshot of who they are. As Jason mentioned, the law practice program is run for 10 years, and we've now had 2,500 licensing candidates come through our program. So when we talk about this gap, this challenge for students who have done 3 years of law school, and then they can't complete the next step, the law practice program has been a wonderful way to alleviate that pressure and that gap and get lawyers into the community. 40% of our candidates have graduate degrees. 34% have actually practiced law in another jurisdiction. We have individuals who have come in, maybe 7 years of practice, and they're ready to start, and our program is giving them that leeway. We have, our makeup of candidates are kind of split between Canadian graduates, but also international graduates. They speak over 90 languages, and they work in communities across Ontario. This year, for example, we have a Crown office from Gore Bay. We have a wide range of employers from across the province, and we're particularly interested in teaching our candidates about the aspects of non-GTA centered practice. And actually, we did host a panel this year, which Doug so kindly joined, to speak about practice outside of main city centers and the benefits of working in those communities and serving those communities. So that's sort of an overview of the law practice program. And before I think we'll probably turn it over to Q&A, I just want to say this. At some point, all of us on this panel will come to you and say, we know of incredible law students or licensing candidates that want to partner with you. They want to complete their licensing process and come into your communities. So at some point, you'll receive an email from all of us, and I hope you'll answer the call to action, that you'll support these candidates that want to be in your communities and continue to work there. Thank you very much.